What's up guys, it's Matt back with another video. Today we're going to take a quick look at this little guy right here. This is the AstrHori 18mm f8 shift lens. As you can see, it's really small, it barely extends past the grip on my Z7, and there's three things about this little guy that are pretty interesting. The first of which is the price, and it's only $119 US, so even for a third-party lens, which it is, it's one of the cheapest options out there. The second of which is that it covers a full-frame sensor, so I have it on my Z7 right now, and if I don't use the shift feature of this lens, which we'll talk about next, it does cover that full frame sensor with a nice 18mm ultra wide field of view. If you're going to equivalent this to APS-C terms, because a lot of viewers on this channel are Fujifilm users, it'd be basically like a 12mm lens. However, if you do use the shift feature, so let's just take a look at what that looks like. This shift feature allows you to move the lens up and down like this, or if you rotate it, you can move it left and right. The use case for this feature is mainly meant to correct distortion on an ultra wide lens like this. So say you're taking a photo of architecture or some trees in the woods or whatever, and you're only so tall as a photographer. If you're taking a photo of something big and grand, you're gonna have to point your camera upward at it. And with the nature of an ultra wide lens, you're gonna have perspective distortion where it sort of seems to bend away from you like lines in a road kind of converging in the distance. So you can correct that by taking this shift lens and going ahead and tilting it up, and it will correct for that distortion. Or if you wanted to, you could also tilt with the subject and create even more perspective distortion. But the problem with this lens in particular is if you're tilting, and especially very far at all on a full frame sensor, you're seeing heavy vignetting because the image circle kind of ends and then you're just left with blackness. If you take a look at the box right here, it is marketed as a full frame lens. You could argue that's because I got it in Nikon Z mount, but Nikon do also have APS-C cameras. I would argue that they really should just market this as an APS-C lens, because as soon as you use the one kind of trick that the lens can do, which is that tilting function, you have heavy vignetting on full frame cameras. You have to put it in crop mode anyway. Just market it as an APS-C lens. So those are sort of the positives of the lens and the things that make it stand out from other lenses, but at this price point there are almost always drawbacks, and this lens has them too. The first of which is that it's a fully manual lens, so you're gonna have to manually set that tilt function and focus your lens. And the other drawback, and this is a big one and gonna be a deal breaker for a lot of people, is that this has a fixed aperture of f8. It doesn't mean it has a minimum aperture of f8, it means it's only f8. You can't darken it down more or brighten it up, of course. So really only good for bright daylight, sort of outdoor scenes, sort of architecture like I was talking about. And just a quick segment on build quality. Even though the lens is made of metal, it feels pretty cheap. It has one of these really thin aluminum slip-on front lens caps, which just feels so cheap in your hand. And on the lens itself, there's no aperture ring, and the focus ring doesn't feel that great. The shift feature feels just fine. I mean, for this price point, you can't expect the world really, but it works adequately. AstrHori is sort of known for making these sort of pancake fixed aperture lenses, and it's not my favorite kind of lens if I'm being honest, but it's kind of cool if you have one like this that at least does something sort of special to make it stand out. The fortunate thing is that in terms of fixed aperture pancake lenses, this aperture and focal length makes the most sense because everything's going to be in focus anyway. You're going to want everything in focus with a lens like this, so having a fixed aperture of f8 really doesn't mean that much. It's not going to be that big of an issue unless you're trying to do, like, it's obviously not going to be an astrophotography lens. You know, f8 is not going to work for that. Essentially, my thoughts on this lens are that it is a one-trick pony pretty much. That fixed aperture really limits it, and it has that shift feature, which is really cool, but you can't use it on a full frame camera, which this is marketed for. And whenever you're using it on an APS-C camera, it becomes basically a 28mm equivalent lens, which is still kind of wide, but it's essentially almost a normal focal length. There's not that much distortion, so then it kind of negates the whole need for having that shift feature. If you're going to have that shift feature and market it for full frame, you have to, make it usable when you have it at all shifting. Like, you barely shift it a little bit and you get that dark edges on the full frame. Anyway, overall this wasn't really my favorite lens because of the reasons I talked about, but if you're looking for an ultra cheap, ultra wide angle lens for a full frame camera and you're not trying to break the bank and you're trying to keep it under 150 bucks, probably the only option out there, but you're gonna have to deal with that f8 aperture. You're not gonna get any sun stars either because, again, there's no aperture blades, so you can't even get that cool sun star effect. Leave a comment down below what you think of this lens, of what you think I should talk about in the near future on the channel, and I hope to see you in the next one, guys. Peace.